بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وفقهنا إذا جهلنا وزدنا علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا يا كريم وبعد. We continue looking at Surah Al Baqarah. We read last week and we discussed last week about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed to the angels the rank of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. But then we got into verse 34 where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about the second part within this passage about the creation story, which is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses Iblis refusing to bow down in front of Adam alayhi salam. And whilst it's still on my mind, because today in Liverpool was Yom Arafah, and for you, you're gonna be engaged in Yom Arafah tomorrow, or for some of you, we're doing it tomorrow. Yom Arafah is one of the most blessed days within the year, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives sins if a person makes an attempt to ask for his forgiveness. And any dua that you have, the Prophet said the best of du'as is the dua of Arafah. The best of du'as is the dua of Arafah. But in one narration it mentions, except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives and showers His mercy on the day of Arafah, except for a person of arrogance. Except for to a person of arrogance. And this is directly connected to Iblis, because the disease of arrogance is the disease that destroyed Iblis, the devil, and anybody who considers himself to be better than others is no better than the devil himself. The nature of the Prophet ﷺ, even though he was the superior, he was the greatest, and he told us that, and we absolutely believe that. But he'd be sitting, like when he was speaking there about a scholar who's just sitting there, and others a bit of hard face sometimes. If you saw the Prophet ﷺ, he wouldn't be that way. He'd be sat in the midst of people. You come to his gatherings, you wouldn't recognise him. You wouldn't be able to tell him out. He wasn't sitting on thrones. He wasn't having people coming and treating him like somebody special, even though he was special. But he would sit amongst them. He would eat from the same plate as them. He wouldn't consider himself to be. He wouldn't make out that he was better than them, even though he knew he was better and they knew he was better. So that's the prophetic nature. But the one who sits and behaves in the manner where he lets people know that he's better, and he may well be better. And outwardly he may well be better. He may be more knowledgeable, he may be more learned. He can discuss anything about religion. He can run. He can entangle you always with all that knowledge that he's got. But that's the devil. That's not the Prophet. So that disease of arrogance is one of the most important factors that the Prophet spoke about, that stops a person's receiving forgiveness from Allah subhanahu on the day of Arafah. And the day of Arafah is a day where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala releases so many people from hellfire. People like you and I, who may be destined, if we were to die now, we may have a bad state in front of Allah. If you and I were to die now, probability for many of us who were to be real about ourselves, with ourselves, is that we probably would face punishment in the grave. We probably would enter into hellfire for a period of time. But the day of Arafah, you just make one or two du'as to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it changes everything. And this is a day, in the hadith in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, there's no day on which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frees more people from hellfire than the day of Arafah. And this is the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala boasts with the angels. He boasts with the angels, and the boast of the angels is because of when the angels said, why are you going to create them when they're going to commit murder on the earth? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown that these people are destined to paradise, even though they do commit wrong, even though all they do just on one day they turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One night later to Qadr you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're destined to paradise. Even though you should have been going to hellfire. On the day of Arafah you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make a few du'as, just an hour or two, make a few du'as, just give up some time, and it changes your nature. But the reason why to tie it in, Iblis was destroyed by the disease of arrogance, where he felt and he said, not just felt, he said, we don't say this, we feel it, I'm better than him. We don't say it, often we don't say it. Al-Ghazali told us, and those who study micro madrasa would recall this from Bidayat al-Hidayah, So that any time you're in any gathering, you sat around with people, always think that you're the lowest of them. Always think that you're the lowest of them. Because people's realities are only known by God. And you're sitting there looking at that person thinking, he doesn't really practice, he doesn't pray, he's only a young child, he's a sinner, he does a lot of haram. So in your mind, you're just putting all these things just to knock him down. But what happens there? Automatically you're putting yourself up. Automatically you're putting, like, he's a sinner, meaning I'm not. He's not educated, meaning I am. Even though you're not saying it, that's what you're implying. And that's the disease of the devil. He didn't say it. He didn't say it. But you're not saying it, but he said it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he relates in verse 34. And the point of that was just to tie it back to Arafah. Arafah. We all at some time or other just get a bit too comfortable with ourselves. We start thinking that we are something, and the day of Arafah comes, and if we have those thoughts in our mind on that day, then the mercy that's just getting thrown down, raining down from the heavens, mercy just raining down from heavens. It's almost like you're going to have to really mess up not to get some mercy on that day. You're going to have to be in a real bad state not to be saved from hellfire. So even though we do feel a bit cocky sometimes, we feel a bit too confident sometimes, we do have moments in our minds where we feel we're better than others. Just stop it for one day. Just for one day, just think that you're a little lowlife and that's it. That there's nothing good in me. Just on one day, just think that about yourself. I'm worthless. I've got no good whatsoever, and I need you to forgive me. If you come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that approach, the door's wide open. If you stand in front of Al-Mutakabbir, the one who's got the right to be arrogant, because he's superior in every sense, that's the name of Allah, Al-Mutakabbir. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's divine. For you, it's the lowest type of human being. If you come to him thinking, I'm special, on the door of the one who is special, that door's going to get closed on you. And the day of Arafah is not a day when you want the door to be closed. So don't behave like the devil.
Just on the Arafah, the work. Sometimes there's so many certain things in your mind.
Say it all.
But you don't actually say anything.
Just say it all. Just say it all. Just get it off your chest. Just get it off your chest. Instead of going to watch West Brom Liverpool tomorrow, just sit at home and just make some dua and try and attempt me to come down as well. He's giving me a schedule for the day. Just go and pray your Eid, go and see your family, come to match me, and go and see your family after. or while you're in the box, just make a few du'as. Right? For Raheem, yeah. If you've got a lot that you want to pray for, just pray for all of it. And if you can't, then just ask Allah subhanahu give me everything that I'm thinking. And the best dua to make in any time, any situation, you say, Allah, I ask you for the best of what the Prophet ever asked you for. And I take refuge with you from everything that he took refuge with you from. So tie it into his du'as, because his du'as are the perfect du'as. So here in verse 34, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the angels, Usjudu li Adam. Bow down to Adam. We had a discussion last time about the bowing. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. All of the angels, which either means all those who are present or every single angel, everyone who is ordered to bow down, except for Iblis. And remember, when you're ordered to bow down to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to Adam, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're ordered to bow down 5 times a day. Except for Iblis. Iblis is the one who refused. When the order came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bow down, the angels all bowed down. When we're told 5 times a day, bow down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can either be like the angels and bow down, or you can be like the devil and refuse to bow down. So when you're not praying, that's the devil who's now pulled you down to his level. If you are praying and you bow down, that's Allah raising you to the level of the angels. And because your nature, and this is the beauty of the human being that Allah created within him, you can be greater than angels, you can be worse than a devil. You can be worse than a devil. You've got both extremes within you. You can be greater than Jibreel alayhi salam, according to some. You can reach to the rank of angels, like the highest angels. That's a theological dispute. Can you reach that? Well, you can reach to the level of angels, and you'll be rewarded Angels don't receive reward, you receive reward. Angels don't enter into paradise, you enter into paradise. Angels don't go into paradise, you enter into paradise. So you can reach to the highest levels, and but you can also plunge to the lowest levels. And sometimes when you look at some people at the lowest levels, they're worse than devils. They're worse than devils. So you see within yourself how you are with your prayer in terms of this ayah. Are you like the angels who all of them bow down, or are you like the devil who refuses to bow down when he's ordered to bow down? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Iblis, Aba wastakbara. He refused. He refused and he was arrogant. He refused and he was arrogant. And as we mentioned at the beginning, what is arrogance? Arrogance is where you feel that you're better than others. Who's got the right to be arrogant? The one who knows he has a rank with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But even he, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who had that right to be arrogant, he could have sat on that throne and said to them that I am superior to you. And if he could have had them bow down in front of him, because they even said, can we not bow down in front of you? And he could have done that. And he would have been worthy of that. But that's not his nature. That's not his nature. And you and I definitely don't have that right, because, as Al-Ghazali says, the great one is the one who's great with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can only know that when you die. Come back. If somebody says, are you great? You're special, you have a rank. Say, come back and ask me on my deathbed. And when I see the angel of death smiling at me, then I can tell you I'm great. But if he's coming looking this nasty creature who can terrify everything, even Ibrahim when he showed him how he's going to appear, Ibrahim fainted when he saw the angel of death as he appears to an unbeliever. If you're in that state, then you've got no right to say you're great. But for you and I, we don't know. And we will never know. In this world, we will never know. So we just consider ourselves not to be great. And we just hope that because of that, we are great with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we look into ourselves, there's nothing special there. But we have a good opinion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's because you consider yourself not to be special, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds you to be somebody of worth. So don't be affected by the disease of the devil, the satanic disease. That's the original sin. The original sin is kibr, istakbara. The original sin that destroyed him such that he had no chance of coming back. No chance of coming back is that he felt that he was better than others. And alhamdulillah, everybody in this room is giving a go trying to practice their religion. This is the problem that people of religion face the most. And whether you're an abid, you're somebody who does a lot of worship, there are times where it affect your heart. There are times where it affect your heart and you start thinking that, yeah, I do worship Allah. You go to the dhikr all the time and you start thinking, all them don't go, I go. So you start getting affected by it. You come to classes all the time. You're always there at the micro madrasa. You're sitting in the class and you start feeling good about yourself because he doesn't go, but he goes. He dropped out, but he didn't. So you're starting looking and thinking, I'm better than him. But you don't know his reality and you don't know your own reality. You've got no right to speak. And you're sitting there looking at the sheikh and say, mashallah, he's a wonderful person. But he doesn't know his own reality, so how do you know his reality? He doesn't know his fate with God, so how have you put him into paradise? We have a good opinion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But don't start categorizing, put people into boxes and say he's guaranteed paradise and he's going into hellfire. You start doing that, you're playing God. And you don't have the right to do that. It could be somebody people consider a low life, the worst of people. He may be the reason why you enter into paradise on the Day of Judgment. It could be your mother sat at home. There you are going to all the classes and you're acting all this pious Muslim, and she's in the middle now praying that, guide that person, guide my son. How many a person has gone on the path of religions because of the dua of their mother without them realizing? They were in the depths of haram and jahili, doing all types of haram. How many mother's dua saved them from that and pulled them out? So we have no right to be arrogant. We've got nothing within us that gives us that right to feel that we're better than others. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Iblis became, or was, what's he say here? He says, the translation says, and was arrogant, he was disobedient. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. There's a question about Iblis. Right? How does he become an unbeliever when he's in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? What's the kufr of Iblis? Because you're there in front of God, you're there with God, so how's he deny it? How's he deny it? Some of them, this is a kufr because of his refusal to accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not refusing to accept that he exists, that he refuses to accept the authority of God. And he refuses to accept that God is the one to be obeyed, that God has a right to be obeyed in everything. The kufr of Iblis is not that he denied that God exists. He's there in the court of God. It's because he denies the authority of God. Because this doesn't come here, but in other passages, he puts the blame onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a consequence of arrogance. Like, how many times have you seen people, they're doing wrong, they just can't admit they're doing wrong, and worse than that, they're blaming everybody else for the wrong. It was his fault, it was her fault, it was my dad's fault, it was my wife's fault, it was that person's fault, it was the boss's fault. It's always some people just can't turn into themselves and just realise, I did wrong. And for some people, it's the hardest word to say, that I did wrong. I didn't, just always trying to push it onto others. That's another, or it's not a satanic disease, it's a consequence of that. And once you're plagued by that disease of the devil, then a result of that is you will never see that you do wrong. You'll never see it's always somebody else's fault. The worst case example of that is the devil. He's plagued by arrogance. What does he do? He blames Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that point. Because he now says, this comes in other passages, he says, فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي لَأُزَيِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ. Because you caused me to go astray, I'm going to make them go astray. He's putting it now onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a completely different level. If you just blamed your father, it's one thing. Now you're blaming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you're blaming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are people who will even do that. There are people who even in this world, they will do that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused me to go. That's why the adab for the believer, your etiquette with God Almighty, you do wrong. It was all created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Good and bad is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's me who made the choice. Any good that came your way, it's a ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any bad, it's me. The reality, it's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't behave like the devil. Why didn't you pray today? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't let me wake up this morning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't let me wake up this morning. He decrees everything. He didn't let me wake up. He didn't let me wake up this morning. Put it onto yourself. Yeah, go on, Tahir. Who are you blaming now?
No.
No, usually me.
Yeah. But you said like last week in this whole conversation with the angels was in the court of Allah. Why would Iblis be there in the first place? I know you said he was like a peacock amongst it, but why would he be
Allah
there?
subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates him to that rank because the amount of worship that he did. But there's secrets beyond that are beyond. But essentially, he worshipped so much that he was worthy outwardly of being in that rank. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to demonstrate that. Ultimately wants to demonstrate that the outward is not enough. He's got into that rank, but there's a disease that never came out of his heart. And that's the fear for you and I. We're all sat here and we'll go to a gathering and we'll go to classes, but there's a disease that needs to come out of the heart. So why is he in that rank? Because of his outward worship. But when it came to the one order, just bow down in front of somebody, in front of another creation, I'm better than him, I can't do that, I'm better than him. You know? So that's just to show, as though Allah's been showing you that outward is not what it's all about in the end. He's put him up there. And outwardly he deserved to be there. Outwardly he deserved to be there. But inwardly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to show to humanity that to believe is that you can be in the greatest of gatherings, and Iblis got to gatherings you and I will never get into, which is the gatherings of angels. He got into those gatherings, but the disease never left his heart. So we should always be concerned about that we're always coming into these gatherings. And some of the ulama of spirituality will mention this, that you come into the gatherings year in, year out, and nothing's changing within you. Then you have a concern that you're going down the path of Iblis, not the path of the Messenger. Because he was in the highest of gatherings and something didn't come out of him. And when there was a trigger, bow down in front of, he's made out of soil, he's made out of earth, I'm made out of fire, and fire burns, and fire has power. Look at soil, soil's dirty. That's qiyas fasid. His conclusion was completely wrong. But that disease then, at that moment, that disease appeared. That disease came out of that person. People who die in a state of goodness, even though they may have lived a bad life, there was always goodness in their heart. There was always goodness in their heart. It just didn't have, it wasn't a time for it to come out. People who've lived outwardly a good life, but they have a bad ending and they deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on their deathbeds, there was always that disease in the heart that never came out until a certain trigger brought it out. So that's why our concern should be more for the inward than it is for the outward. Don't worry the fact that you're not wearing a hat on your head. Don't worry the fact that maybe your beard's not long enough and the mufti is going to sit there and tell you it needs to grow longer. Don't worry about that. Worry about it. But have more concern that why do I look down at people? And why do you, with your beard and your hat, why are you arguing with people and looking down at people? Now, if you're prophetic in nature, you're gonna make the inward and the outward right. Not just concern about the outward, not just concern about the inward. You're going to try and ask Allah to cleanse your heart, and you're also going to try and bring it outward in line with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But you're not somebody who's going to say that, mashallah, I've got a beard, I've got a hat, and that's it, I'm a good Muslim. Or you're not going to be somebody, I don't pray, but my heart's good. Are you going to bring the two of them together? But you will also realize the inward is more important than the outward. Because Iblis' outward was perfect, his inward was foul. So from Iblis, just learn this one lesson: never look down at anybody. Just never ever look down at. Don't even look down at a kafir, because you don't know what his fate is. And maybe because you look down at him, and this is not impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't look down at somebody who's not a Muslim. Why? Because he's a potential Muslim and you're a potential kafir. Anybody can be a Muslim, anybody can be a kafir. You look down upon him, that's a disease most hated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You look down upon him, why can't Allah switch the roles? And say, because you felt you were so special, I'm going to show you he can be special as well. And I can show you how worthless you can become. Yeah.
Especially with regards to good and things, like the moments in life when you look back and that could have been a potentially serious incident where you could have lost your life. But then you realize at that moment you didn't really think anything. It was not necessarily that you had something foul came out of your mouth, but you didn't say anything. You weren't in the situation. You were just blank. Is that something to be concerned about?
Sorry, I don't get the point.
I've been in situations like where I could have had a potential accident, and it could have been serious. But then when I look back in those situations, what was the state of my mind? I feel it was like blank. Like I didn't say I wasn't saying anything or thinking anything in particular. It's just gone blank. And is that something to be concerned about?
Sorry, I don't know. What's the point of mine being blank?
Something happened bad to you, yeah? Something bad supposed to happen.
It was blank in the sense I wasn't conscious that this could be my end, and I need to be thinking about Allah and thinking about my end.
That's a concern for all of us at all times. That's not just in that. That's a concern for us at all times. No, that's not just a concern about mind being blank and you're not conscious about what could happen. Sometimes our minds are not blank, but we're just so busy with other things that we just forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've got that concern at all times. Because most of our lives, we live it when we're not thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's only just brief moments in our lives, and it's those brief moments that we hope is saved because of those brief moments. Allah.
It was just really that I was going to ask about, is that normally when we stray is because your level of iman or faith or taqwa is low at that time, because you're not thinking about it. Because if you were thinking about it, you'd like to think you would stray in anything that you do that's bad. But in the case of Iblis, when he is there, he's in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there isn't a question of faith, he can see.
Yeah, that's right.
So how can he stray?
Well, first of all, he can see. Did he see? He's there receiving instructions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so did the angels. But the angels aren't looking directly at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Iblis wouldn't. It would have been when it says we ordered them to bow down, we said to the angel, it doesn't mean that they, when we say in the court of God, doesn't mean that there's the throne and there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It just means that they received an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that point. But they're aware. He's aware that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. So then it comes down to the denial of the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's rebelling against the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And then touching a little bit on what Zubair was saying a little bit earlier, is that when you're asking for istighfar, that it, I understand what he's saying when there's so many things that going through your mind you can't ask it, because you know what you recollect in terms of what you've done that's wrong. There are hundreds and thousands, if not more, things that you probably have done that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
So is it okay to kind of like ask in general terms for istighfar for every single sin, or do you have to individually single it out?
No, just ask. Because we do a lot that's wrong. Yeah. And sometimes it just builds up, and if we're asking for every single one, it could be a bit too long. So just make a general dua, and at the same time, those specific ones that perhaps you're most concerned about, make dua about those. And then just to finish, because for some of you, Arafah is going to be your day of Arafah is going to be tomorrow. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the best of dua is the dua of Arafah. And he also mentioned, he says, the best thing that I and all prophets before me have ever said on the day of Arafah is, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu, lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shayin qadir. So read as much of that as possible on the day of Arafah. I have a wird of that tomorrow. So read it 100 times, because in the hadith, if you say it 10 times, it's like you freed 4 slaves. If you say it 100 times, like you freed 10 slaves. And the ultimate slave you want to be freed is yourself, because of that. So make a wird of it tomorrow. Try and ensure for those who are doing it Eid tomorrow and Arafah today, you still got some hours left. Try and get as much of that dhikr in, because the Prophet said it's the best dua the best dhikr that he made on the day of Arafah was this. And some narration mention when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ فِي أَيَّامٍ مَعْلُومَاتٍ. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these set number of days. He said that's these 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and it's this dhikr. La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu, lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shayin qadir. Try and do it 100 times. Try and do it 1,000 times. Whatever you're able to do. Set yourself an amount, a realistic amount of what you can do, and then just go for it. Do as much dhikr as possible of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this day. Allahu a'lam. Any last questions? Tahir, you okay? Excellent. Amy, you okay there? Good man. You're a special one, you are. I don't care what they're all telling me about. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina.
Same when you do tawbah as well.